Newsmakers, evangelical support for Israel, revival, and a grieving father's ultimate hope. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable news figures. On today's Newsmakers, researchers Dr. Mahdi Inbari and Dr. Kirill Bumin reveal the fascinating elements driving evangelical support for Israel. Let's welcome them to Newsmakers to break it all down. So, Dr. Bumin, I want to start with you. When you look at the data that both of you have been looking at when it comes to Christian support for Israel, what has been most shocking to you?
Well, we've been doing this research for quite some time, and one of the things that I find particularly interesting is the degree to which the attitudes that we see in the Christian community are crystallized or rigid. We have seen relatively little change in attitudes toward support for Israel, support for Palestinians, or support for neither from 2021 onward. So despite the recent fighting and despite this terrible tragedy on October 7th, the attitudes seem to be relatively stable across the time periods that we've observed. So that is one thing that's really interesting to me. Another area that we have explored quite extensively with the evangelical community, but just beginning to explore with Catholics and mainline, is the generational differences. And so we've observed repeatedly in the evangelical community that under 30-year-olds are substantially less supportive of Israel, even after we take into account their religious attendance, their specific religious beliefs, political beliefs, especially in comparison to the 50 to 64-year-old respondents who are even more supportive of Israel than the 65-plus crowd.
That's really interesting. You know, when I hear that, I know we have to be careful with this in research, but Dr. Inbari, when you looked at those numbers, were there any ideas or concepts surrounding what might be driving that generational difference?
Yeah, of course. Young people today have access to information that people of my age, I belong to this generation of the 50 and above, didn't. We didn't have social media. We didn't have, the internet. And so young people are exposed to those social medias and other types of medias. And these social medias that they have today are they are designed, by design, they are such that the people are receiving just what they want to see and hear.
Yeah.
So it creates an echo chamber, it creates like you're in like your own mindset that you're not exposed to other views. And this creates a lot of polarization also as a result. So these are one of the major aspects. Another aspect is that it's very visual. You can see things that back when I was younger, in that age, when I was opening the newspaper, I was reading. Now they see, they don't read, they see. It creates a different effect. So these are definitely I think, the reasons why this young generation is much different views on political and social aspects than the older ones.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to consider with social media coming in and becoming so dominant that it has an effect over time with more young people using it too. But, you wonder in 20 years when everybody's been on it, what does that look like? I mean, we can't project ahead. We don't know. But that actually is a very interesting consideration on every issue, not just this one. Dr. Bumin, you spoke a little bit about the evangelical support for Israel. Just to dive in a little bit more on that, what were some of the biggest drivers of that evangelical support based on the research you've done?
Support for Abrahamic covenant, this notion that God's covenant with the Jewish people is intact and eternal, and that as a result of Gentiles supporting Abrahamic covenant, that there are blessings for the Gentiles to be had, godly blessings. That aspect has repeatedly received support not only in the evangelical community, but indeed across all Christian denominations that we have studied. In fact, in our 2024 survey, that is the #1 most impactful variable that we've considered in terms of relative impact on people's attitudes in terms of support for Israel. So of all the political, sociological, economic, demographic, religious explanations, support for Abrahamic covenant is exceptionally important. We also find for evangelicals again and again that ascribing to a particular theology or theological view related to end times, known as premillennialism, has been really important. And premillennialism paints a very clear-cut picture for the role of the Jewish people and Israel in the end times. And so that they may not know all of the different facets of this eschatological view, this end times view, but what they do recognize is that elevated role of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. And so that repeatedly buttresses support for contemporary Israel in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. There are also some more. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it is fascinating, too, because, if you look at the book of Revelation, it talks about Israel, Jerusalem, right? So this idea that Israel, from the perspectives you've highlighted there, that Israel needs to be or would be part of that end time scenario, theologically, it is interesting how that would then coalesce with the views on what is currently happening now and how that would, create that support. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make that point. Absolutely. So go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I just want to inject a comment that young evangelicals are much less inclined to the premillennial views, and our studies repeatedly show that. So it's another way to explain why young evangelicals are drifting away from supporting Israel. It's part of this eschatological view that is a part of that mix as well.
Yeah, in fact, there was just a survey the other day showing exactly what you just said about young people being much less, inclined to have that viewpoint. That is interesting. But go ahead. I apologize.
Premillennialism was a part of popular culture, of social fabric for the evangelicals in the 1960s and 1970s. There were a set of, books about redemption. There was the great late great planet Earth. It was in the popular imagination that that vision of the end times is relevant and important. State of Israel was just recently created. It really jived very well with some of the predictions and beliefs in the evangelical premillennial tradition. It resonated with a view of Revelations 20. And so as a result, I think the older folks also were, in the environment that really popularized that view, made it a part of living environment which they recognized in their daily lives. Contemporary young folks, of course, see a very different kind of political and sociological environment, and they see much less relevance to premillennialism. But they're beyond theology. We found among evangelicals some pretty common things that are already in conventional mainstream media. Like we find that there is repeatedly greater levels of support for State of Israel among conservatives and GOP supporters than among liberals and Democratic Party voters. We find that socialization is really important. Being in pro-Israel circles for the evangelical community produces that positive effect that rubs off. There are some caveats to that, again, with young people, but by and large, evangelicals socialize in circles that support that pro-Israeli position, and that's why we continuously see that on average, evangelicals are more supportive of Israel than other Christian faiths.
Well, I so appreciate you both coming on to break it all down, and I'm looking forward to having you back again during the next survey wave to talk about what you find. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
We'll continue to track new data surrounding evangelicals in Israel as it releases. We'll be right back with more Newsmakers in just a moment. Welcome back to Newsmakers. The world was recently stunned when two young missionaries, husband and wife Davey and Natalie Lloyd, were murdered in Haiti. Today, Missouri Representative Ben Baker joins Newsmakers to talk about his daughter, Natalie, and his son-in-law, as well as the legacy they left behind. Let's welcome him here to Newsmakers. I want to thank you for joining me today. I know this has been an incredibly difficult time for you and your family. I wanted to start with Natalie and Davey. What would you want people to know about them?
Sure. So, they were special people, exceptional in so many ways, very mature beyond their years, and it played out in their life. And, this is something that has been the most difficult thing we've ever faced, but we want to tell the story of Davey and Natalie. And their example is just so unique and powerful. In a time where there's such a contrast, their life was such a contrast to our current culture, where people are so caught up in self and worried about all the things that really don't matter. And Davey and Natalie were completely sold out to the calling of God, the ministry, and they were an example of selfless love toward people that ultimately in this situation did not return that love. But yet, even when they were given the opportunity to come home, they decided not to because they wanted to make sure that the kids had somebody there. The kids would have had nowhere to go if they would have left. That's the kind of, mentality they had. And it was just a beautiful thing to see.
Thinking about the fact that, they were in Haiti, which anybody who's been watching the headlines knows how dangerous, as you were alluding to there, it has been there and what has been going on. And you mentioned that selflessness. That was the first thing I thought about when I heard what happened, was that here are these two young people who are sacrificing their lives very literally to be down there and to help people. And, talk a little bit more about their inspiration. What led them into that? I know that Davey's family has spent a lot of time in Haiti. Just talk a little bit about what led them there.
Sure. So for Davey, he grew up there. He was born in the States, but his father and mother have been missionaries there before he was born. And so it was his people. The people of Haiti were Davey's family. And, Creole, Haitian Creole was his first language. And from a young child, David and Alicia will tell you that Davey had intention to be a missionary to Haiti, to stay there. He had a long-term goal of pioneering churches, planting churches in the outer areas of Haiti. That was kind of his long-term goal. So obviously his influence was his parents and, God's touch on his life. From an early age, gave his heart to Christ, and the rest is history. Natalie was very similar. I've been involved in missions work from the time I was 4 years old. My grandfather's a missionary in Guatemala City. I've done a lot of missions work around the world, India, Africa. Never been to Haiti. I'd planned to go once Davey and Natalie were there, just hadn't had the opportunity yet. And so I think some of that rubbed off on my kids, and I've always taught my children that the will of God is the absolute, most important thing that you could pursue in your life, no matter where that takes you, and then later we had to deal with, the fact that Natalie chose missions and even in a dangerous place, but it was something that we still supported. It was something that I believe in, that principle. Yet I don't understand all of this, how it has turned out, and may not completely understand it until I get to heaven. But I still try to trust that God is sovereign and he has a plan that's greater than ours. And so, her influence was that, of course, in Bible school, it was something that she had a heart for missions and wanted to pursue that, and especially children. And again, that played out in their ministry there.
How have you, you are incredibly strong. I've seen even the messages you've posted talking about, thanking the people who lined up to honor Natalie and Davey. And it was just really moving to see. But how have you kept your faith and your hope alive in the middle of what really is a parent's worst nightmare?
I believe it's just having that foundational relationship with the Lord. I can't imagine doing this or even attempting to do this without that connection and that relationship. every difficulty that I've faced in life, I think that foundational understanding of who God is, that he is sovereign, that our life is in his hands, is something that has undergirded every difficulty that I've faced. Of course, this is the most difficult thing by far we've ever faced, my wife and I and our family. But you can literally feel the strength. And that's something that I've never experienced before to this level, is the thousands, if not millions of people praying, the people supporting, and how God somehow will give you strength in all of this it's a remarkable testimony of what faith really means. And the storms of life are something that everyone faces, but the deeper your foundation is, the stronger you can withstand the winds and the storm. And so, that's a part of this message to people, anyone who will listen, is that other people have faced unbelievable tragedy as well. And I know people of faith has as well. And you read about those things, but this time it is very real to us, and just trying to lean into his word, trying to lean into what we've always believed as true, but experiencing it like this is a totally different thing. Especially like grief. I've taught about grief from a biblical perspective. I taught Bible school for 8 years, talked about grief, but there's nothing like actually experiencing it in this level. And so it's something that God is working in our lives in this, and I believe he's working in many, many others as well.
I so appreciate you taking the time during such a difficult time, and, we'll have you back as needed to discuss, supporting, the work that is going on there, whatever we can. We appreciate you joining us today. Please be praying for the Baker and Lloyd families as they continue to navigate this loss. This is Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we caught up with evangelist Nick Hall. He is on a mission to share the gospel around the globe, with millions of people, in fact, around the globe. And we're going to welcome him here to Newsmakers to share the incredible moves of God that he's been observing. Here is Nick Hall. So, Nick, you launched a new year-long campaign, Anthem of Grace. It started on Good Friday with a massive global broadcast. Let's start with that broadcast. I was blown away. I think you hit 67 million people with that. Talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so it's been amazing to see what God is doing, and I think we all know this, but it's happening. I mean, there's a revival spreading. There's joy, there's hope, but really this whole campaign is around two things. It's around the song Amazing Grace, which is the most sung and most translated hymn ever. And then the second thing is just the story of every believer whose life has been changed by Jesus, and trying to tell the story of God's grace in our lives and welcoming people into that anthem of grace. And so we did this global broadcast, 60 languages, went literally around the world. In fact, there's still going to be another probably 10, 20 million more people that will, watch and experience this broadcast, because it went across Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. And so those numbers are still coming in. But yeah, just incredible to see the hunger. And we're really just trying to see a global movement of just pointing back to the grace of God, and hopefully equipping as many believers as possible to share that story of how God's changed them.
Yeah, I love that. Obviously, you look at the Apostle Paul, you look at that life change story. We see all of our own journeys, coming to Christ. And it's by story that I think so many people realize the truth of the gospel and change as a result of that. What is it like for you, being somebody who has been in ministry? You do this incredible work, but to know that because of something you and your organization have worked on, your ministry, that more than 70 million people will have seen the truth of the gospel. That is a gravity I can't even imagine experiencing. What is it like to know that you've helped make that happen?
Yeah, well, I think the reality is, I was talking to our interns last week, and I said it's an interesting thing when you realize God is using you. It's like the greatest drug on earth, right? Of just when you see that your life is being lived on purpose, and you see that God is changing you and growing you and using you in spite of you. And like immediately there's this tension there of like pride and self, which is a really funny thing because it's so clearly God. And yet, you know, the flesh comes in and we want to say, look at what we did. And man, this is amazing. And I'm just at the season of life where it's like, I got 3 kids. I've been in ministry now 20 plus years. And I'm just incredibly humbled and incredibly thankful, you know, to still be following Jesus. I'm thankful to be more in love with Jesus than I've ever been. And, you know, whether it's one person across the street or 100 million people around the world, like, I mean, I want to be faithful, and just seeing more people know Jesus and more believers talking about him.
Well, and just final question as we close out here, you are in the light business, you're doing Anthem of Grace, and obviously Pulse, you've been doing this for a long time now, but you guys are in the midst of some incredible things. If people want to support you guys, get involved, where can they go to get more information?
Yeah, pulse.org is the best place to learn about, you know, different campaigns we have going on, as well as unleashing evangelists. We're trying to raise up an army of evangelists to go and tell the world, and social media as well, just Nick Hall Pulse. But man, just thankful to be on mission with you, Billy, and just every person that's praying. I just think this is all hands on deck moment. This isn't about some of us are a bigger deal and some of us are a lesser deal. This is every believer activated for the glory of God. It's game time.
I love that. That's a great place to close. It's game time. The campaign is Anthem of Grace. Nick, appreciate your time as always.
Thanks so much, Billy.
You can head on over to anthemofgrace.com for more on Nick Hall's powerful campaign. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching the show, and be sure to head over to the CBN News YouTube channel for the full interviews that you saw on today's episode. Plus, you can check out our new daily Newsmakers podcast. We feature one full interview every single day, Monday through Friday. Be sure to subscribe to that podcast on your favorite podcast platform. As for this show, we'll see you again next week.